Hey everybody, it's time once again for my magical mystery tour through the sociology text. This time it's chapter 14, Gender Stratification. My search might be the eternal quest for yet another cheap gag to milk. It's a calling, folks. Okay, Jesse Bernard said, we all live in single sex worlds, and most we know from history, the humanities, the social and behavioral sciences deals with the male world. Wendy Commoner said, pregnancy and warfare test the limits of equality. Gloria Steinem, let's pause. Who was Gloria Steinem? Mm-hmm. Time's up. Gloria Steinem was one of the leaders of the feminist movement in the 1960s, the so-called second wave of feminism. She founded Ms. Magazine. And one of the things she did is she decided she wanted to see for herself back in the 60s whether or not men objectify women for sex. Well, I could have saved her the trouble. Yes, men do. Okay, so what she does is at the time, the Playboy magazine had what are called Playboy clubs, kind of like what would be a contemporary version, maybe Hooters, but not to that extent. So the wait staff were all women, and they would wear very revealing outfits with a bunny tail and bunny ears and so forth. You know, it was pretty much of a TNA show for the guys. And so she goes undercover and becomes a Playboy bunny. And her conclusion about whether or not men do objectify women for sex was, in men's eyes, all women are bunnies. She also said, the truth will set you free, but first it will piss you off. And boy, have I found that out when I lay truth on people. Anyway, hey, goes with the term. Okay, gender and sex are often used interchangeably, but they are two separate terms. So remember, sex refers to the biological division of humanity, male, female. Gender is the personal traits and social positions that members of a society attach to being female and male. As a dimension of social organization, gender shapes how we interact with others and how we think about ourselves. Historically, gender has involved hierarchy, ranking men and women differently in terms of power, wealth, and other resources. Hence, the focus of this chapter in your text is on gender stratification, the unequal distribution of wealth, power, and privilege among men and women. Well, perhaps you have heard, because boy, I heard this growing up, females, they are the weaker sex, you know, sort of a justification for men to subjugate women. You can also check out, for yourself, check out figure 4-1, which compares men's and women's athletic performance. But let's examine some of the evidence, shall we? You go, Maynard. Nature's basic blueprint is for a female child. Only if testosterone is introduced does a fetus produce male genitals. Also, male embryos are more likely to spontaneously abort than female embryos. Goes a long way to explaining men's commitment issues. Hey, want to get married? Abort, abort, abort. Also, women have a higher heat and pain tolerance than do men. You know why? It's because women need it in order to put up with men. How about this? Women can outperform men in many tests of long-term endurance, particularly in that of life, because as is noted in your text, women on average outlive men by almost 5 years. You know why? Because men have to live with women. My servant Arturo out mowing the lawn. Keep it down out there, Arturo. We're recording. Excuse me, Arturo. Now, back in the day, in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s, the two greatest dancers on stage were considered to be Gene Kelly and Fred Astaire. And so they got all the raves. But Fred Astaire also had a dancing partner, Ginger Rogers. But Fred Astaire got all the props and she didn't. Bob Thaves observed everything Fred Astaire did, Ginger Rogers did too, but she did it backwards and in high heels. Yeah, hey, it's a bitch to dance in high heels, particularly stilettos. You know, the other night, perhaps I've said too much. Just strike that from your mind. Catherine McKinnon said, gender is what gender means. It has no basis other than the social reality its hegemony constructs. Well, for the exam on page 359, you need to know about gender in global perspective, specifically the research by Margaret Mead and George Murdoch. Margaret Mead in doing this so why a cross-cultural analysis? So we're trying to find out, is there anything about gender that sticks up cross-culturally? In other words, is there something about men are stronger than women, and so we attach things that women are the weaker sex and so forth and so on. Anyway, she found that the comparison of three societies suggests that many, if not all, of the personality traits which we have called masculine or feminine are as lightly linked to sex as are the clothing, manners, and the form of headdress that a society at any given period assigns to either sex. We are forced to conclude that human behavior is almost unbelievably malleable, responding accurately and contrastingly to contrasting social traditions. So in summary, the research of Mead and Murdoch demonstrate, this is on page 360, demonstrate that generally societies do not consistently define most tasks as either feminine or masculine. As societies industrialize, even the general women cook, raise kids, in other words, women are in charge of reproduction, men production. This even changes, as we talked about before, as the importance of muscle power declines, and you don't need men hauling the plow around. In other words, the most important point is that male biological differences that do exist are certainly not adequate as an example, as an explanation of gender. Okay, so basically what gender is we make the whole thing up. What constitutes masculine, what constitutes feminine? In any culture, society just makes it all up, and it's not the same from culture to culture. So it's a social construct only, has nothing to do with inherent abilities or skills. Okay, patriarchy and sexism. Patriarchy is a form, think of the word pater, father. Patriarchy is a form of social organization in which males dominate females. While a tendency toward patriarchy may be culturally universal, there is significant variation in the relative power and privilege of females and males. You may recall, yeah, we remember Maynard. You may recall we talked about the fact that if you go back to horticultural and pastoral societies, most of the deities were female. So, you know, even that's changed over time. So when there's patriarchy in society, well, then God must be a dude. And when there's matriarchy in a society, as in women are producing most of the food, then God must be a dudess. Is that right? Dudette, I don't know. Charlotte Bronte said, conventionality is not morality. And what she's describing is the fact that men will often say, well, this is the way it's always been. Men have always dominated women. Hence, conventionality is not morality. Just because that's the way it's always been doesn't mean it's right. Sexism is the belief that one sex is innately superior to another, a key ideological underpinning of patriarchy. Now, I know you'll all remember my priceless impersonation of Aristotle when I gave you an excerpt from his text, Politics. And really, I've been getting a lot of emails and a lot of positive props on social media for that amazing presentation. Anyway, I'm going to give you another Aristotle quote. Get ready. Excuse me. Exactly. The male is by nature fitter for command than the female, just as the elder and full grown is fitter than the young and immature. The courage of a man is shown in commanding, of a woman in obeying. Here's a quote from Cato the Elder: suffer women to arrive at equality with you, and they'll from that moment on become your superiors. You must be talking about marriage. Okay, here's a shocker. Of all people arrested for drunk driving, 84% are men. I bet you didn't see that coming. All right. Jean-Paul Sartre, the existentialist, said, men think themselves superior to women, but they mingle that into the notion of equality between men and women. It's very odd. Okay, now I'm going to have to set this gag up because sometimes when I've used this gag, people go, oh, good. Okay, what is man's best friend? Man's best friend, a dog, right? Okay, keep that in mind. Carol Travis and Carol Afear said, why is it man's best friend woman? Probably explains why so many men treat their women like dogs. Imagine you were a therapist getting $100 an hour, as do some of my former social work students, and a patient marches into your office. See, when you go to a therapist, and I'm on record recommending we should all take a little visit to the therapist, not because I'm trying to trump up business, but because I'm trying to point out we're all a little nuts, some more than others, but we're all a little nuts. And so the only way to get sorted out through all that nuttiness is talk to a therapist. Get an objective take on yourself and your issues. See, because when we're growing up, let's say we start off with 100, right, in terms of togetherness. And then as we're growing up, all kinds of stuff goes down, right? And so by the time you're an adult, all of a sudden you're only at 86 or 52 or 75 instead of 100 because, hey, you got a little nutty over the years because of crazy stuff that happened to you. And I know people always say, well, I would surely remember something that traumatic, wouldn't I? Duh. No, that's the whole point. Well, anyway, when you go to a therapist, the first thing they do is they always have you come in early, like they do at the doctor's office, and fill out all the paperwork. And they always have like a survey to give you a little personal inventory to kind of give the therapist a heads up because he hasn't met you yet. And so look at that and gives you a little bit of a feel for where you're coming from. So imagine you're filling out this self-assessment and you check off the following boxes: submissive, dependent, unintelligent, feel incapable, emotional, weak, timid, passive, very sensitive, feel like a sex object, I'm only attracted because of my physical appearance. Okay, so you're the therapist and you're looking at this and you're considering, what do you think this person's diagnosis is? And most importantly, does this person have some really good health insurance? Well, here's what the person's diagnosis is. The problem with the patient is she's the typically socialized American woman. These are all traditional feminine traits that are associated with traditional gender socialization in the United States. They appear as negative personality traits when compared to masculine traits, which include dominant, independent, intelligent, competent, assertive, strong, brave, active. Margaret Mead said to consider such traits as aggressiveness or passivity to be sex-linked is not possible in light of the facts. So the problem is we're taught to adopt these personality traits and act accordingly, comprising gender roles. Interestingly, these feminine masculine traits appear as polarized opposites. Even the phrase the opposite sex clearly conveys the idea that gender is a matter of opposition and competition. Okay, so let's get back to gender roles. Now, so what's the big deal, Well, see, here's the deal. If you grow up being exposed to all the advertising, all the influences and so forth that get you into that gender role of what it is to be a female and what it is to be a male, what constitutes masculine, what constitutes feminine, and you have buy-in and you act accordingly, you are not being yourself. Now remember, one of my whole points of this course is to turn you on to you, and that's just another insight. Are you being you, or are you just playing the gender role guidelines? It reminds me of something the great comedian Chris Rock said when he observed that when you go out on a date, you're not meeting that person, you're meeting that person's representative. Yeah, because we all have this facade on, and part of it's the gender role thing. Yeah. So you got to get through all that and just be yourself. Why? Is because why would you go through this facade and pretend you're somebody you're not, or play these gender role guidelines without even realizing you're doing it, and you come across as not you, and then eventually you comes out, and you and the other person go, well, who the heck's this? She's been in there for a while. Mira Komarovsky said, to be born a woman means to inhabit from early infancy to the last day of life a psychological world which differs from the world of men. Let's see, the late Alan Bloom, he wrote a book, and in it, it's called The Closing of the American Mind. And he was bemoaning the fact that most universities are staffed by liberals, meaning the faculty are liberals. Certainly not all, but they are. So if you go to a place like Liberty University, there it's almost all conservative professors. So you get a different take. So what he was saying is students in college education, for the most part, are not getting exposed to conservative approaches, conservative thought, and as a result, they end up having a closed mind circling around simply liberal perspectives on things. But anyway, in this book was an interesting quote. He said, law may declare that the male nipple may be equal to the female nipple, but they still will not give milk. Well, I don't know what he was going for in that, but having said that in class one time, one of the students who was a biology major said that's not necessarily true, that under certain conditions, the male nipple can give milk. Now, I say this to you for those of you who plan to have babies, right? And here it is 3 a.m. and the baby's hungry, and your sig other says, well, listen, you got the tatas, you're going to have to take care of business here. I'm going back to sleep. From now on, you can say, oh, yeah, well, you can pump out some milk too. So I'm going back to sleep and you feed the kid. Just trying to be helpful. Gender and the family. Jesse Bernard said, most human beings live in single-sex worlds, women in a female world and men in a male world. The two are different from one another in a myriad of ways, both subjectively and objectively. This differentiation process begins in the family, from what we wear to the tasks assigned to us to the games and toys we play. One study actually found that even in neonatal units, the nurses handle male babies and female babies differently. They handle female babies more delicately, and they handle male babies more roughly. Now, this is shocking, but they actually saw in one of the videos of the neonatal unit that two of the nurses were using one of the male babies as a football. And one nurse tells the other nurse, go out for the long one. She whips out the kid to him, and the other nurse, boom, drops it on the floor. Hey, don't worry, it's a male baby. They can handle it. Shocking, shocking. Now, and even today, what we have, here's one of my pet peeves, the gender reveal party. It's not a gender reveal, it's a sex reveal. You're not, my God, it's a masculine. My God, it's a feminine. That's gender. No, it's a sex reveal. Even that's wrong. Oh, geez, stupidity. Anyway, and what do? If it's a boy, it's often blue. If it's a girl, boom, it's pink. So once again, the differentiation process begins before the kid's even born. Now, in terms of the difference with the toys we play, in the past, boys would play with GI Joe and girls with Barbie. Now, who knew? I'm playing with Barbie, and I didn't know it was a problem, and that was only another year or two of therapy. But the point is, who knew, and was it really that harmful? Now, I did play with Barbie and GI Joe, and what I figured out early on is, and this is a little insight, and is that her friend Ken was gay, but at that time when Ken, was Ken, it wasn't cool to come out of the closet, meaning it was dangerous to come out of the closet. So Ken, and just look at the way Ken dressed, you can tell he was gay. Anyway, Ken would hang out with Barbie and use Barbie as what's called the beard. In other words, to pretend that they were girlfriend and boyfriend so that people wouldn't realize that he was gay because, again, he didn't want to get trashed. So I knew this early on. So I never tried to hook up Barbie and Ken. I was always trying to hook up Barbie and GI Joe. Now, I know a lot about Barbie because my late mother, was an antique collector and she collected Barbie dolls. And boy, do I got a batch of Barbie doll stuff sitting in my basement, which is basically worth nothing anymore because Barbie dolls have been, while they've been sold in 140 countries with 45 different ethnicities, sales are way down. Reason why is because they've been replaced by superior dolls that kids are more interested in playing with. And Barbie internationally is considered a sign of capitalist imperialism. So don't buy Barbie. Anyway, did you know that Barbie has a full name? Barbara? No, 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 no. Her first name is Barbie. What's the rest of her name? Ready? Barbie Millicent Roberts. Yeah, man. What a waspy name. White Anglo-Saxon Protestant, Millicent Roberts. And she turned, let's see, she turned 60 in 2019. Oh, you got to admit, she doesn't look like she's 60. I don't know what she does, but whew, it's impressive. Now, over the years, Barbie's been kind of problematic because when Barbie first came out, she was just the typical, how can I put it? She played the stereotypic female in the 50s and the 60s. Barbie didn't have a career or anything like that. Barbie was just, Barbie's just cute. Okay, so what they did years later, in fact, this just happened a few years ago, they always felt this was a bad role model for girls in terms of just her physical attributes. Because Barbie, if you extrapolated her actual size to a woman's figure, she would have a waist of 11 inches and her boobs would be so freaking big they'd have to have twin shopping carts to carry them around. I mean, her bra would consist of 2-car hubcaps and a chain or something, but because it was just ridiculously disproportionate. And so, they said, you gotta change Barbie. It's a bad thing for girls to be looking at that. And so the idea was they toned down her boobs and they widened her hips a little bit so she looked proportionately normal. But back in the day, that wasn't the case. So now they're trying to make Barbie be more with the feminist movement, Barbie the feminist. And so I know we'll have Barbie the astronaut. And so the only problem with Barbie the astronaut is because she had such big boobs at the time, you couldn't even get her into the space capsule for a space launch. So that wasn't working out too well. But over the years, they really did try to make Barbie more contemporary and have a variety of wife roles that would, be inspirational for young girls. When Barbie turned 50 in 2009, they had, it was called, they had Barbie, actually, you could pull the string and she'd say things. She was dressed up in stilettos and fishnet stockings. And when you pulled her string, she'd crack gum and go, "Hey, want a party? Hey, want a party?" And she had a little apartment with a red light, and it was called Barbie the Adventurous One. Kids loved it. They go to Toys R Us, they couldn't get them on the shelves fast enough. Now, when she turned 60, again, to keep her contemporary, they had Barbie the Cougar, and Barbie would hang around at fraternity houses and try to hit on some of the frat boys. Barbie the Cougar. Kids loved it, loved it. Hey, here's a shocker. About 85% of all cosmetic surgery is performed on women because women do get hung up on having to look good, as opposed to men who can just look like shit all the time and it's cool. All right, a survey question. If the husband in a family wants children, but the wife decides that she does not want any children, is it all right for the wife to refuse to have children? Is it all right? Yes, 76%. No, 16%. What? How? What? She can't say no? Like, see, here's the problem, folks. Once again, I rest my case for prenuptial counseling. See, before you get married, go talk this over with a therapist or your religious figure or somebody, because you're not looking at things objectively. Love does not conquer all. These are discussions you should have before you actually get married. I'll give you a great example. Two of my friends actually own a counseling practice. And so they too are therapists, and they were going out together and they decide, hey, we'll get married. So they decide, well, we can't just give other people this advice. We should go to prenuptial counseling too. But hey, we got it together. We're therapists, get a couple of sessions in and boom, we'll be ready to go. They were in therapy for a year and a half, finding all these things, aspects of their relationship that could be deal breakers on down the line. For example, one was a slob and the other was a neatnik. Who's going to control the money? Are we going to have kids? If so, when? So these are decisions you got to think through in advance, so that this is a direction you two can go together and be happy. Okay, peer groups strongly reinforce the process started in the family or counter it. I know we tried to raise my dear son Tyler to be sort of unisex, and that worked right until he got into school and started hanging out with his peers. And then all the stuff we had him do, he rejected as being girly stuff, and he wouldn't do it anymore. So, yeah, we tried. Schooling. Historically, while few U.S. men were literate, even fewer women were literate. And I gave you data on that in the previous chapter where I showed you worldwide. That's certainly the case as well. Okay, now, one of my fond interests is reading the newspaper and watching some of the clever headlines they come up with for the articles. Now, perhaps you've heard, because boy, I heard this a lot growing up, and I still hear from time to time now, that women don't have the chops to go into science and math. They just are innately inferior when it comes to science and math ability. Well, get the title of this headline. Are you ready? Subtract the notion that girls trail in math. Subtracted. Well, the notion that boys are better than girls at math simply doesn't add up. According to a study published in the journal, it doesn't add up. It's so good. An analysis of standardized test scores for more than 7.2 million students in grades 2 through 11 found no difference in math scores for girls and boys, contradicting the pervasive belief that most women aren't hardwired for careers in science and technology. Both parents and teachers continue to hold the stereotype that boys are better than girls, and that's just not accurate. The study also found that girls scored in the top 5% in math and science almost as often as boys. So, yeah. Okay, so here's a little fun-filled fact. What was the first undergraduate program in the United States, college in the United States, to have genetic engineering? It was Cedar Crest College. That's right. Quite some time ago, Cedar Crest decided we're a women's college. Women can do math. Women can do science. We're going for it. And so they did. Okay, what else? Where else do women and men learn these gender role guidelines? The mass media. Observe the media and you be the judge. Are men and women portrayed in a way reflective of their gender roles? One sort of test you can use is look at an ad and see if that advertisement, if it has a male and a female, and if you reverse the roles, would it be the same ad or is it all based on some sort of gender role guideline? Gender and stratification. Wait, do I have some other goodies here? Oh, I do have some other goodies. Pause. On page 364, you don't need it for the exam, need to know it for the exam, but I just want to point out the beauty myth is featured. This was a concept developed by Naomi Wolf, and it's the idea that striving to be physically attractive to men is the key to women's happiness. Naomi Wolf said, when women come too close to masculine power, someone will draw critical attention to their bodies. Hedy Lamarr, late actress, said, any girl can be glamorous. All you have to do is stand still and look stupid. I thought this was interesting. See where you're at on this scale. A recent survey found the following percentage of women use these products within 1 hour of getting up in the morning. Lipstick gloss, 56%, hairspray, 49%, mascara, 45%, foundation, 36%, eyeliner, 32%. Well, personally, I kind of go for the natural look. I'll use a little bit to kind of highlight the cheekbone, maybe a touch of lip gloss. I don't like to overdo it too much. But yeah, that's just me. Elsa Schiaparelli, the fashion designer, said, women dress alike all over the world. They dress to be annoying to other women. It took me a while to figure that one out, but now I get it. Women ain't dressing for men, they're dressing for other women. Shut up, Maynard, you're giving it all away. It's cool. It's cool. I'm one of the girls. Don't worry. Okay. Patricia Schrader, former U.S. representative from Colorado, said 53% of the world's population are women. They perform 2/3 of the world's work, yet they receive only 1/10 of its income and own only 1/100th of its property. This used to be a big debate in the early 1990s whether or not women should be in the military, should be on the front lines. And I'm thinking, anybody who's ever been married knows women should be on the front lines. Anyway, hey, now women are on the front lines. This happened during the Persian Gulf War, and women who were staged in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia were behind the front lines, but nevertheless, missile attacks could reach them. So there is no such thing as the front line. When you're in a battle, everybody's in the front line. And so now you have women as fighter pilots in the Air Force. And so, yeah, women are doing everything men can do. And why not? Right. Gender and occupations. The top 10 list of jobs with the highest concentration of women is found in table 14-1. Now, there was a job prestige scale, which I alluded to in chapter 11. Anyway, 11, 12, excuse me. And so I compared the jobs that are most predominated by women. Are they high or low prestige jobs? So the prestige score goes from a high of 82, that's the most prestigious job, to a low of 9. So these are the jobs typically preoccupied by women. 1, dental hygienist only has a prestige scale of 52 with a high of 82. Preschool or kindergarten teacher, 66. Secretary, administrative assistant, 46. Dental assistant, less than 52. Speech language pathologist, about 60. Childcare worker, 36. Licensed practical nurse, less than 66. Hairdresser, cosmetologist, 36. And that's the only ones I could find, a correspondence between the two. So the jobs that are predominantly female jobs, in terms of women choosing those professions, are basically fairly low prestige jobs. Question for you. What do the jobs that have the highest concentration of men all have in common? In other words, these are jobs where 99% of the workers are male. Take a moment. What jobs could those be? Hmm. 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 Time's up. They are brick mason, stone mason, heavy equipment operator, and coal miner. You know, again, heavy equipment operator, does that take a lot of strength? I don't know. I don't even get it. Anyway, these are all relatively low prestige jobs ranging from 25 to 36 in the social prestige scale and all require physical strength. Although there are certainly women who are brick masons, stone masons, heavy equipment operators. Maybe there's women who are coal miners. I honestly don't know. Okay, gender stratification in the workplace. Let's see. Percentage of women in the labor force, it's now over 60% are in the labor force, well over 60%. Housework is described in the text as women's second shift, so to speak. This unpaid, I should have gone second shift, then I didn't have to say, so to speak. This unpaid work within the home has as its complement volunteer work, which is unpaid work outside the home. So the question becomes, do women or men disproportionately bear the burden of necessary housework? Well, figure 14-2 shows how much housework in the US is done by men and women. On average, women perform 16.2 hours per week, while men only perform 9.4 hours. Now, you know, this is because we don't understand men. Men genetically are only capable of a few things in the way of housework. They are capable of taking out the garbage, mowing the lawn. What else? They can shovel snow, and they can lift 12-ounce cans of beer if you fetch it for them. But that's it. You know, they're not capable of anything else. Now, here's what men do all the time. It's a scam. So you're trying to get the man to do more work around the house. They go, hey, why don't you do the wash? I'm really busy doing this and taking care of the kids. Oh, fine, fine, fine. So what he'll do is he'll purposely go in and sabotage the wash. He'll dump a whole gallon of bleach in and move all the whites and the colors together, you know, and then the whole thing's a ruin. And then he says, oh my gosh, honey, I guess I just can't do this. From now on, it's probably best that you do the wash. Nice try, Buster. And she says, listen, you got a degree in engineering and you can't read the instructions in that lid. Just follow the instructions. Do the wash. You know, and this is not something, this comes under my generic statement, men are really stupid. Not some men are stupid, men are really stupid. If you learn nothing else in this class, learn that. Anyway, Austria, it's a country. Austrian law requires that men equally share household chores and childcare with women. The Austrian Women's Ministry claims that while marriage is a private matter, government guidelines are needed. Why? Because men are stupid. You got to actually pass a law to make sure they perform their fair share of housework. Okay, so here's an interesting one. A study that was performed to find what difference does it make in a relationship if in a heterosexual relationship, and this would be true, I would imagine, in any kind of a relationship, same-sex couples as well, when the housework is shared. Well, they found that now in this particular study, they were focusing on heterosexual couples. So what they found is she is, as a result, she is mentally happier. The kids are healthier. The kids perform better at school. On and on and on, all these parameters of mental health and health that are all attributable to the other partner, in this case, the man sharing the household responsibilities. And, you know, if this wasn't enough, you know, all these things, she'll be happier, she'll be mentally healthy, the kids will be more productive, on and on and on. If that doesn't work, they also found that women excuse me, that when men and women share the household responsibilities, women are more amorous, if you get my drift. Okay, so Men's Health magazine, here's this whole study of all the benefits of sharing housework. And Men's Health magazine shared only one part of that study, and the study basically said, this is on the front cover of Men's magazine, housework makes her horny. That's the best they could do. So, you get this image of a male going, you know, vacuuming the floor going, I'm vacuuming, honey, get ready. Okay, how about gender and income? I keep seeing different data on this, but some data I saw that women now earn about 85 cents for every dollar a man earns, which is going up pretty rapidly because the previous study I saw was 80 cents, which is good news. So, a woman earns only 85 cents for every dollar a man makes. And so it makes it sound like women are underprivileged, which is true, but have you thought of it in a different way? Men are overprivileged. For every dollar a woman earns, a man earns $1.15. Okay, the World Bank reports that women have achieved earnings parity in several Latin American, Caribbean nations. Among high-income nations, the nation closest to earnings parity is Sweden with 90%, in other words, 90 cents out of the dollar. Other countries, France 77%, Germany 70%, and Japan 67%. Female CEOs, chief executive officers, are outpacing their male colleagues in pay, although they remain mostly outnumbered in the top echelon of US companies. Only about 5% of all corporate CEOs are women. Okay, so this is all very discouraging. And so what you need to know for the exam starting on page 366 is, what are the causes of this gender-based income inequality? Well, in your text, it notes that there are 3 factors that account for these income disparities by gender. Number 1, different jobs are held by men and women. In other words, women tend to hold lower pay clerical and service jobs. So right off the bat, women are earning less on average just because of the type of job they hold. 2, parenthood is more of a barrier to the career advancement of women than of men. In other words, women disproportionately are saddled with the responsibility of taking care of the kids. Also, to avoid role strain, think back, you remember, role strain, women who choose to have children may be unable or unwilling to take on jobs that can get them more earnings and weekends off. Excuse me, that can tie up their earnings. And let me start over, folks. I can't read my own handwriting. To avoid role strain, women who choose to have children may be unable or unwilling to take on jobs that tie up their evenings and weekends. A study was done one time of physicians, and they found that mothers chose to work about 12 fewer hours than childless women. Among men, having children had no appreciable effect in their working hours. Comparing only physician parents, those were both the husband and wife were physicians, women worked 38 hours per week, men 53 hours. Okay, so here's the whole deal. It's called medical practice. And so the idea is you want the most experienced physician possible because practice makes perfect. Well, right off the bat, women are getting significantly less practice hours if they're physicians and have children than are men. And the third reason is discrimination. The first 2 reasons account for 2/3 of the earnings disparity between men and women. The third reason is discrimination against women is still practiced in subtle and not so subtle ways. The subtle ways are the so-called glass ceiling. The glass ceiling effect is, it goes back to a study, I believe it was done in the early 70s of the insurance industry. And they found that what happened is women get hired at the bottom and they only rise so far in the hierarchy In other words, they hit like a glass ceiling, and that's it. That's as far as they can move up. And at first, it was considered to perhaps be just an anomaly of the insurance industry, but then studies of other industries found it was true right across the board in the automobile industry. All the industries had the so-called glass ceiling effect. Meanwhile, men get hired at the bottom and move right up to the top. So the fact I gave you that only about 5% of all corporate CEOs are women is evidence of this fact. Oh, let's see. And not such subtle way is just blatant sexual harassment in the workplace. Gender and education. Okay, now to set this one up, when was Cedar Crest College founded? 1867, that's correct. You know, coincidentally, there's a room in the TCC called the 1867 room. Yeah, oh, that's why. That's correct. Remember, founded in downtown Allentown in a church, same church where they housed Liberty Bell during the Revolution. Anyway, so this was written in 1870, excuse me, said in 1873 by Edward Clark of the eminent Harvard University, 6 years after Cedar Crest was founded. He said, identical education of the two sexes is a crime before God and humanity that physiology protests against and experience weeps over. So Cedar Crest, and being an all-women's college, was not the only one, but a daring venture that women should actually receive a college education. Muhlenberg was founded about 10 years prior to that as an all-male institution. They finally went co-ed in 1960, also in downtown Allentown. So the two have had kind of parallel developments, because then when Muhlenberg moved to the west end of Allentown, later on, so did Cedar Crest. Currently, women represent nearly 60% of higher education enrollments in the US. And depending on where you go, even in co-ed colleges, women are much more predominant in the classroom than are men. Gender and politics. Table 14-2 depicts significant firsts for women in US politics. Now, I think this is interesting, but you be the judge. The first Miss America beauty pageant was held in 1920, the same year that Congress passed the 19th Amendment to the Constitution, giving women the right to vote. Now, here's how I think it went down. I don't know this, I'm just thinking this is how it went down. So women want the right to vote. Remember the suffragettes fighting for the right to vote? And men are finally, all right, fine. But here's the deal. We'll give you the right to vote, but in return, we want a beauty contest, and it's got to include the swimsuit competition. And okay, the deal was cut. Now, you know my thinking about, hey, if you're going to be, for critical analysis, you got to be logical across the spectrum. You can't just be selectively apply your logic to a certain arena. So, for example, I gave you drugs are a great example. People say, well, we have to make cocaine and heroin illegal because they're dangerous for people. And I'm thinking, more dangerous than alcohol and tobacco, which kills millions of people every year. So no, that can't be the reason, because otherwise it's totally illogical, because you say the one's dangerous, but the other's more dangerous, and you continue to make it legal. All right, so my thinking is, okay, if you're going to insist on having a beauty contest with a swimsuit competition, then from now on, I want to see the swimsuit competition apply to presidential politics. Wouldn't it be great for the next debate to see Trump come out in a thong and Biden in a thong? Or if you go back to the previous presidential election, how about Hillary in a two-piece and Trump in a thong? Huh? Hey, get that vision out of your head. Probably need to go to a hypnotist now. Check out National Map 14-1 to see the extent to which U.S. women are elected into state legislatures. In 2017, just 25% of all seats were held by women. Now, again, these are 2017 stats. Sorry, I don't have anything more current, but a lot changed in 2018 because of so many women getting elected into state legislatures and the U.S. House of Representatives. In Congress, 19% of the women, 19% of the members of the House are women, and 21% of the members of the Senate are women. US governors, only 8% are women. Women constitute half of the world's population, yet hold only 23% of seats in the world's 193 parliamentary governments. That's up from 3% 50 years ago. So 50 years ago, only 3% of those seats in the world's parliamentary governments were held by women. Now it's up to 23%. So that's progress. Now, in the United States, at the current rate at which women are represented in state legislatures, US Congress, governors, president, at the current rate, in about 400 years of this continuous progress, women will have equality to men in terms of representation in our legislative arena. Hey, be patient. It's only 400 more years. You know, see, that gets back to that when men are, see, well, you're more equal than you used to be. There is no such thing as more equal. You're either equal or you are not. Margaret Thatcher, who was she? Prime Minister, Great Britain. Now get this, you know, if a guy's a badass when he's the head of government, he's like, she was a badass as head of government, and she was called the Iron Maiden. Anyway, she said, in politics, if you want anything said, ask a man. If you want anything done, ask a woman. Okay, while we are not using any of these for the exam, in the text, the structural, functional, symbolic interaction, and social conflict theories of gender are covered, and the table on page 377 summarize them all. So at least take a peek at the table. You'll learn more, even if it's not on the exam. Screw that, Maynard. Fine. Intersection theory, recent additional social conflict approach. It is an analysis of the interplay of race, class, and gender, which often results in multiple dimensions of disadvantage. Research demonstrates that disadvantages linked to race and gender often combine to produce very low social standing for some people. Income data demonstrating this point is in the text. So while women are disadvantaged, some women are more disadvantaged than others. There is no single woman's experience. Each woman has particular social standing and experiences that must be understood on their own terms. Okay, for example, I remember a sociologist who does really interesting videos that he uses in class was pointing out that when he was a graduate student, he was in this study group about gender because at the time, you know, this was kind of a new area of study in academia. Remember, there were no gender courses back in the 60s. This was all as a result of the 60s that courses like this are predominant in universities. Anyway, so two women in the group were talking, and the woman says, you know, she said, we all really you need to unite as women, which has been a real problem for feminism because not all women unite under the umbrella of feminism. And one of the reasons why is the following example. So this woman says, white woman says, you know, when I look in the mirror, I see a woman. And a black woman said, see, that's the difference between you and me. When I look in the mirror, I see a black woman. Okay, so there are differences within women, some of which other women don't necessarily appreciate. So getting back to intersection theory, let's suppose, and this is something, I use a text that for years that uses these kinds of examples in my diversity class. But let's suppose, and this is critical for a social worker or anybody else working with clients, is let's suppose you have a black woman who's from Puerto Rico, who's low income and is a lesbian. Okay, well, that woman has quadruple jeopardy going, right? Because there are 4 different levels in which she could receive some form of prejudice and discrimination. So to truly understand this woman, you have to understand how all four factors combine uniquely in this woman's life. That's called intersection theory, which is critical again if you're a social worker or you're a healthcare worker, whatever. You need to understand people and where they're coming from and how their disadvantages multiply according to the quote, quote, disadvantage status. Regarding sexual harassment, there is no one law that explains sexual harassment. The basis of it is found in Section 703 of Title VII of the 64 Civil Rights Act that outlaws discrimination based on sex, and also Title IX of the Equal Education Amendments in 1972 fortify that. However, what constitutes sexual harassment has been largely determined and defined by the courts. Okay, feminism. You know, at this point, I always ask the class, show of hands, how many of you consider yourselves to be feminists? And at most, I'll get a third of the class, at most, including me, of course. And I think it's rather interesting, particularly at an all-women's college, that women don't identify as feminists. And I think it's because there's a big misunderstanding of feminism. So let's look at it further. You need to know about this on the exam. It's on page 378. Karl Marx said, anyone who knows anything about history knows that great social changes are impossible without the feminine foment. Ferment. Okay, feminism. You know, and it's kind of not atypical when I ask the survey in class, the hand survey, because only 20% of adults identify as being feminists. But I think it's because we don't understand it. Here is simply the definition of feminism: the support of social equality for the sexes in opposition to patriarchy and sexism. It's just equality. That's all feminists are shooting for here. As is noted in the text, feminist ideas in the US go back to the 1840s. This was the so-called first wave of feminism. So women gathered together, feminists, these early feminists, and they got together in Seneca Falls, New York, at a convention. And out of that convention came the Declaration of Sentiments from Seneca Falls, New York, 1848. Quote, it starts out, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men and women are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights. In 1792, Mary Wollstonecraft wrote, which is considered the first known statement of women's rights in the world. It was called A Vindication of the Rights of Women. She wrote, consider I address you as a legislator, whether when men contend for their freedom and to be allowed to judge for themselves their own happiness, be it not inconsistent to subjugate women, even though you firmly believe that you are acting in the manner best calculated to promote their happiness? Who made man the exclusive judge of women if women partake with him the gift of reason? Well, we don't want to defeat that argument with pure logic now, do we? A key point about feminism is that it represents a process of re-socialization in which all human beings have the opportunity to develop and express the full range of their human potential. Key ideas include, number one, feminism calls for social change. It's critical of the status quo. Social change necessary to create equality. William Allen White wrote, my advice to the women of America is to raise more hell and fewer flowers. Two, expand upon human choice so that all human traits can develop. Three, eliminate gender stratification. Four, eliminate sexual violence. Five, promote sexual freedom. Ensure that women have control of their own sexuality and decisions regarding reproduction. Lucy Stone, one of those early feminists, in 1855 said, it is very little for me to have the right to vote, to own property, etc., if I may not keep my body and its uses in my absolute right. Now, on this point, understandably, women who identify as pro-life would not be on the bandwagon for that aspect of feminism. Okay, so for the exam, you need to know, and it's on page 379, and you can just summarize, look at the table there, and it summarizes it. The differences between liberal feminism, socialist feminists, and radical feminists, because I think part of the problem is that people who oppose feminism associate it not with mainstream feminism, but some of these more extreme forms that are really represented in small numbers represent by small numbers of feminists. Liberal feminism is more typical of mainstream feminist ideas. They accept the basic social organization of society. Socialist feminists differ with liberal feminists in that they believe the basic social organization must be transformed so that human liberation can be achieved collectively, not individually, as liberals believe. They also oppose the family because living in isolated units discourages the solidarity that leads to collective action by women and men. Radical feminists take it even further than a socialist transformation of society. They believe that to attain equality, society must eliminate gender itself. For example, use new reproductive technologies to separate women's bodies from the process of childbirth. Radical feminism dovetails with the children's rights movement that aspires to free children from dependence on adults. Rather interesting concept. Okay, so public support for and opposition to feminism. There's been little change in attitudes in recent years, and that more men than women oppose feminism. Well, what are the reasons? Well, number one, some men don't want to give up their privileges. Yeah, see, again, the thing with privileges, male privileges, is it's invisible to men. They don't even realize they are privileged, which is true of all privilege. It always remains invisible to those who have it. Two, some men oppose a movement that attacks the traditional family. Three, some traditionally socialized men and women aren't comfortable with warm and fuzzy men. You're like, yeah, see, because men go through the same stuff that women go through as to what are the appropriate gender roles. And so when I was a kid, the idea, well, particularly being raised in this area, Pennsylvania, Germanic parents, is that you don't show any emotion, you don't show any pain, you know, so if I'm out playing football and I break my leg, I hear my old man yelling down from the stands, walk it off, you wuss, it's just a broken leg. Check, Dad. But then in the 60s, it became, wait, this is such an unfair way for men to have to behave to fit this gender role guy. Why don't we have more sensitive, warm, fuzzy men? Okay, as the time period goes by, then women go, I don't really know if I want a guy who's going to cry at the drop of a hat. Could you be kind of rugged, but also be sensitive? Could you work that in there too? So men go through the same kind of gender role stereotyping and expectations women do. And four, most people believe women should advance, but individually, not collectively. Getting back to some men don't want to give up their privileges. When I was going to graduate school at Washington University in St. Louis at that time, and there's a movie about her now, Phyllis Schlafly was leading the opposition to the Equal Rights Amendment. Now, the Equal Rights Amendment was passed by Congress, but in order for it to be enacted, it had to be ratified by 2/3 of the states. And there's actually an argument going on today to still allow states to ratify, although I think that ship has sailed in terms of the legal time frame in which that can happen. Anyway, so at the time, the legislature of Illinois was getting ready to make a decision on whether or not to ratify it. So Phyllis Schlafly, even though she was a female, bitterly opposed this, the Equal Rights Amendment. I used to see her get accosted by students all the time on campus in terms of arguing with her and so forth. She was attending the law school at Washington University. Anyway, so what she did was she had women dress up like, for want of a better way of describing it, Betty Crocker. And so they're all wearing traditional female garb in terms of I'm a baker and so forth. And they actually actually stood out on the steps of the Capitol building, the Congressional building, where they were going to, the legislators were going to vote that day, holding cakes and pies, wearing an apron. And as men came up, they said to him, this is what you're going to lose out on, if you pass the Equal Rights Amendment. And I got to admit, they were smart because they realized men are really stupid. And the old expression is, a way to a man's heart is through his stomach. And damn if it didn't work. Actually, I don't know. I have to go look and see if it actually got passed. I just thought it was a heck of an interesting approach. Okay. Hey, that's all we got for this session. I'll see you real soon for chapter 15, which is going to be on race and ethnicity. See you soon. Bye.